5 songs that you need to be studying or learning if you want to take your bass chops and writing to the next level. Metal Bass Monday. So we're going to dive right in this week. There's a lot here, and especially since the one question I think I've gotten more than any other since I started the channel is one I'm hoping to address and give really solid examples of how to cure it in this video. That question is usually, how do I stop just playing along with the guitar? How do I write bass lines that involve more than just copying the riff or being able to vary my composition skills? Or how do I just write songs as a bassist and write creative things? So I picked 5 songs that I thought exemplified a number of different genres, styles, and approaches to bass playing that would be necessary or advantageous in a lot of different situations. We're going to check them out. I'll recommend each, and the links will be down below for you to check them out in full. And I'll tell you why you should be listening to them and what you should be learning and absorbing as you go through them. So let's get started. Number 1 is going to be the song I Don't Know from The Blizzard of Oz by Ozzy Osbourne. The bass player on this album is Bob Daisley, and he is the just foundational template for what is great in hard rock and metal bass. The guy just writes incredible bass lines, and he can fill every single hole and find every place to poke through in a mix where there's fills and there's contrasting bass lines against the guitar and all these things, but he never overplays, but he's always playing all over the place. So it's a fantastic study in how to take advantage of the gaps in music, how to fill in little statements, how to listen and play more with the drums and create a secondary statement, and how to support guitar rather than just copy guitar. He's also a person I refer to a lot when I'm trying to reference what I call pulse playing, which doesn't seem to be played anymore, and I don't understand why. I think a lot of it is a lot of bass players have just picked up completely their technique from guitar players. But pulse playing is kind of a staccato way of hitting the notes where you shorten them. You get a thump, 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 thump instead of da, 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 where every note runs together. It tends to be a bit more that, ironically, fingerstyle players do, although Bob Daisley was a pick player. I really recommend sitting down and, if you can, learn this song. Even if it's not as heavy as other stuff that you listen to or things like that, it is a master class in working with drums and creating fantastically interesting bass lines. It's just great top to bottom, and the man is all over the neck. There's tons of great fills. He takes advantage of every available opportunity. So if you're looking for how do I get started in contrasting the guitar and not just playing the riff, that's the one for you. I Don't Know from The Blizzard of Oz. Song number 2 is going to be from and I don't really feel like they fit in this genre, but some people would call it nu metal, the band Mudvayne. And a bass player that gets brought up a lot on this channel, Ryan, is an absolute monster. I'm going to recommend the song Death Blooms. This one, again, is a fantastic class in being able to lock in. I mean, the man's timing is absolutely astounding. And being able to hit, and you can tell that he's doing what I feel, at least, a bass player's number one job on checking in and writing a line is he's listening to the kick drum. You can hear him punching all over the place. He also does some really interesting things when it comes to not playing. He'll skip a note and let the kick drum hit it so that it becomes these unexpected staggers. He's really almost, I would say, progressive in the way he approaches it. There's also approaches where we've talked about, like harmonics on the channel. In the very beginning of the song, there's a couple of harmonics, and it's a great show of how you can use harmonics as a compositional tool and not just as something that, you try and do to impress or you use as a fill. The other thing that's really interesting with him, and this goes to dynamics and texture and control of your tone. During the verses, he's driving with this really grinding, heavy attack, a very fretted instrument, grunt type of sound to it. When they go into the chorus, he moves up to the upper end of the neck. Again, a great way of learning how to be able to use kind of more melodic chords and arpeggio type of things. He's using a very chord approach, but single note line idea behind it in the chorus to this one. But the way he's doing it and his tone has an almost fretless sound. He's making a very conscious choice about that, that during the verses, when everything is just a sledgehammer, he's much more fret hitting and much more grinding in his sound. And as he moves up, it becomes much more fluid and soft and almost beautiful. So having contrasting tones, we usually think of that as a guitar player's domain, that bassists have a sound and they don't really have a dynamic range or vary their sounds that much or things like that. But that's not the case, and it's incredibly effective when he does it. Like I said, I could see a lot of people actually being confused as to whether he's playing a fretless during those parts or not. But he covers an astounding dynamic range, and that's the lesson to learn out of this one, is how he's able to create such an incredibly tight rhythm section by locking in with that kick drum all the time. His use of really kind of divergent ideas like harmonics and things dropped in to create some interesting compositional ideas, and then his use of a completely different tone to add expression to what he does when he drops the low end and moves into a more melodic and upfront statement. Great song for this type of thing. Highly recommended. Sit down, study it, and if you can, try and learn it. Number 3 is going to be the song Elephant Gun off the first David Lee Roth solo album, Eat 'Em and Smile. The bass line's played by Billy Sheehan. This is a fantastic example of when people talk about overplaying. I like to dispel that myth that, when people say, a lot of times they just mean any bass player that's active or any kind of bass line that uses a lot of notes. It's often called for. You're only overplaying a part if you're just stepping all over things and your statement doesn't make any sense. If it is called for, then there's no such thing as overplaying, and this song exemplifies it. From the beginning to the end of this song, he is shredding. I mean, the funny thing is, in the verse parts, he's only playing one note, but he's playing it high on the neck. I think it's an F. I'm not sure, though. He is just rolling. An absolute just spray and pray kind of one note blazing that he's laying on. And that's just the verse part. Then he's matching licks with Steve Vai for the parts, and he's giving all this space for Steve to just sit out. Then they even go into a dueling solo section where Billy takes a solo, does tapping, does an almost guitar-like solo section, then hands it off to Steve. Then they meet at a unison lick and go back out. There is not one note you could take out of his bass line this entire song and have it not suffer. So it's not overplaying. He absolutely crushes it. There's not another song I can really think of where the bass is just so dominant at a speed level and just constantly shredding from one end to the other, and it works. The energy of this song would utterly suffer if Billy didn't approach the bass line the way he did. So this is a great song, not only to get your chops up, but to learn the opposite lesson of it's playing a lot. Don't let people fool you into this one, that playing a lot means you're overplaying. It's only if you're playing a lot inappropriately. This song will teach you that top to bottom. It's a great, great bass line. It's a lot of fun. And the way you know it's not overplayed for sure is the fact that if you're not listening to it as a musician or anything else, it just puts you in a good mood, and it's exciting and it's fun, and it's because of the bass primarily. So check that one out. Elephant Gun from the Eat 'Em and Smile album. Absolute shred masterclass in how to overplay, but not overplay. Now we're going to look at the other side of the coin of that. Another song that is utterly reliant on the bass, but it's a much smoother, bluesier type of thing, but it shows how crucial a good solid bass line can be, in that a literal guitar rock god is sitting second to what the bass is playing in this. This is going to be the song Push Come to Shove from Van Halen's Fair Warning album. I love this bass line. It's such a, to use a stereotypic term, pocket bass line. But it's just, the groove is so thick and it just swirls around the fingerboard at all the right times. But aside from the guitar solo, there is not one section in this song that the bass isn't 90% of it. It is holding down the whole thing. It's implying the chord changes. It defines the groove. It creates the melody pieces. Amazing stuff. It's not a super complex bass line. It can be tricky, though. It can be deceptively tricky because a lot of people think that less notes always means simpler. It's where the notes are placed, and it's also, there's some string jumping and stuff that keeping it clean, and that's always the hard part, can be tough. But a great song, definitely a driving along head nod type of thing. But I mean, honestly, the guitar could drop out of this song with the exception of the guitar solo, and the bass would, you would barely notice it in some parts. I mean, the bass is this song. So it's kind of the flip side to Elephant Gun in that it's more understated, but it carries the entire thing. You're still, with less notes, making a contribution that is the entire song. So excellent version of that. Slower songs or songs with a bit more melodic bass, that type of thing. Push Comes to Shove, Fair Warning album from Van Halen. Learn it, know it, live it. Now, last up is going to be the song Omnipresent Perception from Beyond Creation. Something definitely different than the other ones that we've talked about. And I like this one in that it shows a completely different thing from what we're talking about most of the time. In that, as I said, most people come to me with the thing of how can I play differently than the guitars? And this shows how to play differently, but in not the way you might expect. This is a really technical death metal style song that has some astounding fretless playing in it. And it's also done on a 6-string. A lot of the bass parts are in unison with the guitar. He does break out at times, and there's actually some melodic pieces in it that are absolutely just great. But it's a much more riff-following example than all the others. I wanted to include this one because the lesson to be learned out of this is that, one, if you have to work in a format like this where it's so technical and the notes are so fast that you're just not given a lot of choices, you can make another statement through picking innovative tone centers or an instrument. In his case, he uses fretless that really helps him stand out in the mix and create the same kind of statement, but a little different. The other thing is that it's a great showcase for, they do some really cool tapping work. It's definitely a chops masterclass on this one. But the cool thing is it isn't just about chops. His tone and the way he approaches it, I mean, he cuts right through the middle, which in death metal, it can be really difficult a lot of times, especially since a lot of the sounds are so scooped for the bass to cut through it. But his decision not only gives him a slightly different musical statement, but it also gives him a tone that, while you might not think it would be appropriate up front, actually helps him be heard. But using a fretless also gives him an option that a few players have done, DiGiorgio noticeably, things like that. But it's still such an unexpected sound in metal that it gives that song a different, sonic palette. And he's able to use vibrato and movements in it that give different colors than you're going to hear anywhere else. And that, I think, is why that song has been viewed on YouTube and listened to so many times. Just that one difference. I don't know if it would have the same appeal if it were a regular fretted bass. So learning how to really get strict and be able to play just as technically and match riffs with the guitar players is a skill you're going to need anyway, because sometimes you do want to follow the riff. You shouldn't just be bucking it to buck it. It's, you want to be able to do it when you need to, but know when to step out. but being able to do it and then pick something else that gives the bass its own defined role, even when working with the guitars or doing complicated maneuvers with them, that's a really cool and intriguing choice. Plus, you get some tapping and things and learning some ways of how to apply that into metals, a few odd time signatures, things like that. And this one being different in that it's the much darker and more extreme side of metal. I wanted to give one out where somebody could still stand out from a mix much more than they usually do in death metal, and make some interesting, not just note choices, but tones, colors, and conceptual options. So definitely check this one out from Beyond Creation. Again, I think it's probably their most viewed song, so it's well worth a check into. And this one's going to help you a lot, especially the guys that watch that do the more extreme forms, in helping you get a grasp of how can I make color and note and kind of compositional choices that don't stray so far, but still make an interesting and standout decision for me. Do you have some songs that you've worked on that you feel like these really kind of developed you as a bass player? They opened your eyes to some new options. Hit me up in the comments and let me know. I'm always on the lookout for these, and maybe I'll wind up bringing them up or doing a study of them on a future video, and I'm always interested to hear anyway. And are you already familiar with some of these songs? If not, after listening to them, what did you think and what did you gather from them from your first listens to them? I'm always interested to see how something first strikes somebody if they're not familiar with it and they just kind of go off of a recommendation. So again, hit me up in the comments. Let's talk about it down there, and toss some other songs back and forth on our thoughts about these 5. I hope this helped you, and I hope that this helps you develop as a player in your chops, your composition skills, and being able to play the riff when you want to, but always have the option not to. Sonic choices, all that. I felt like these were 5 strong and important ones, so I hope they serve you well. With that said, that's going to wrap up this Monday. And as always, I greatly appreciate you hanging out with me, and I will see you on the next one.